As you work on your wealth, certain choices that you make are going to help and certain ones are going to hurt you. Let's talk about the idea of choosing classic over trendy. Hi and welcome to another episode of From Amateur to Expert, the daily series that helps you to become a top name and grow your wealth. If you haven't subscribed already, please do, and please hit the bell to receive notifications as to when there is a new video. There's a new one each day. I'm the author of a couple of books on the topic of wealth. One is called Poverty Proof, 50 Ways to Train Your Brain for Wealth, and the other is titled Is Your Thinking Keeping You Poor? 50 Ways the Rich Think Differently. Today I'd like to share with you one simple mistake that entrepreneurs, and especially young entrepreneurs, make to their great detriment. I've made this mistake and it's one where I've corrected my thinking, and I'd like to share the idea with you. I would like you to choose classic over trendy every time. Now, here's what I mean by that. Let's take the emotionally subjective world of buying cars. I love cars and I could easily bankrupt myself on that hobby, but I choose not to, and I've learned a couple of lessons down the way. Now here's one that I particularly like you to take to heart. If you are shopping for a new car, I want you to choose classic rather than trendy. Now let's start with this assumption. Let's say that you are arguing that the car you choose is important to your career. I would have a few questions about that to begin with. I sincerely doubt it, and I think that young entrepreneurs in particular spend way too much money on cars when it actually makes no practical difference to their business life. So there's a question mark there to begin with. However, let's say that you've won the argument. Let's say that everywhere you go, your potential market and your potential paying customers are walking you to your car and they are judging you by it. It's highly unlikely, but let's assume you've won that argument. In such a case, I would like to encourage you to go classic over trendy every time. The great temptation for a young person in particular is to rush out and buy the most expensive hot hatch they can get their hands on. And that's exactly the mistake I made early on as well. However, it turns out that people who own businesses, people who make decisions, people who have the power, potential, and capital to invest in you and to in any way influence your life are very unlikely to be impressed by the latest trendy hot hatch. Your friends will be blown away by it, but if anything, it could actually peg you down a notch in the minds of top decision makers. So here's what I do instead, taking that as a simple and practical example. The amount of money that you would spend on a new hot hatchback, you could spend the exact same amount and get yourself a pre-owned, low-mileage C-Class Mercedes-Benz. It will do more for you in the image stakes, it will be more impressive to older buyers, and this is perhaps the most important part. It doesn't suffer the trendiness trap. You see, the problem with trendy things is that they change all the time. 1 year, 2 years down the line, the thing that was trendy and hot today is suddenly outdated, and now you have to spend more money. Classic doesn't suffer from that problem. If you buy something that is classic, understated, grown up, mature, and simply beautiful, you can keep it for 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case might be. It doesn't do your image damage because it never goes out of style. So that's just talking about the world of cars, where I say that you should buy classic rather than trendy. But the same principle applies to pretty much everything. How about your clothing? Do you go classic or do you go trendy? The trendiness trap will do exactly the same thing to you in the world of attire. 1 year down the line, you have to change everything because you have to keep up with the latest trends. Classic never goes out and will serve you well. All of that money is saved in the background, and I argue that it creates a better, more formidable impression of you. Now here's one caveat to that. If your branding and positioning are uniquely quirky, let's say, for example, you've started an advertising agency and your goal and your mission is to stand out as something quirky, unusual, creative, and crazy, then you might have an argument for doing that on purpose. But that's fairly unusual. For most people, building a brand, building a business, and becoming experts within their industry, classic will tend to outperform trendy pretty much every time. So what's your scenario? Which would work better for you? Can I convince you to go classic over trendy, thereby saving money and looking like a grown-up? I believe if you go that route, you will be one step closer to owning your industry. Come back tomorrow, let's cover some more ideas about how you can go from amateur to expert. If you're interested in the interaction between brand, design, and wealth, have a look at my video on how to position your brand as premium.